The first thing is you might be thinking, well, I don't have a thyroid problem. And certainly that's understandable. Many people have been evaluated by traditional blood work and are told that their thyroid is working properly. And that may be very true. When there's a problem with the thyroid itself, that's called primary hypothyroidism. And it reflects an inability by your thyroid to produce adequate amounts of two hormones, T4 and T3. Now, for many people, they're producing adequate amounts of T4 and T3, and they still experience many of the metabolic slowdowns that are consistent with hypothyroidism, or we'll call thyroid metabolic disruption. So if that's the case, then we need to understand that regardless of how well the thyroid produces those two hormones, that only represents one of 23 different steps within the thyroid metabolic chain of events. So if there's a breakdown in any of the other steps, that's not easily reflected on traditional blood work. So all of a sudden you may go undiagnosed and be told that your thyroid is working properly, and that's absolutely correct. But there may be other downstream issues that are creating problems. So let me just paint the picture so you understand what one of those would be. The thyroid, as I mentioned, produces two thyroid hormones. The first one is T4. T4 is 93% of what the thyroid produces. Now, as large a percentage as that is, you would think that's the most important of the two hormones. But T4 represents a very small impact in regards to thyroid metabolism. T3, which represents only 7% of what the thyroid produces, has a much bigger impact on thyroid metabolism. So what we need to do is understand that elsewhere in the body, T4 needs to convert into T3. Now that can happen in two places. Number one is going to be the liver. 60% of that conversion process of T4 to T3 occurs in the liver. The other area is the gastrointestinal tract. That's where another 20% of that T4 to T3 conversion takes place. And the remaining 20% is turned into reversible T3, which is unusable by the body. So what we want to understand is if people are struggling with T4 to T3 conversion, if there's challenges with regards to liver as a consequence of a myriad of possibilities, then all of a sudden that T4 to T3 conversion can be decreased. If people are experiencing inflammation or other issues with their gastrointestinal tract, then they could see challenges with their T4 to T3 conversion. So all of a sudden they could start experiencing and expressing all the symptoms of hypothyroidism without necessarily being hypothyroid. Their thyroid, again, is producing adequate amounts of thyroid hormone, but it's one of the downstream steps. Now, I've only shared one of those other steps, which is the conversion process. There's 21 others. So what we want to do is help people to understand that if you're experiencing thyroid metabolic slowdown, it does not necessarily mean that you're primary hypothyroid. Now, there's two groups of people. There's the people who are undiagnosed, and then there's the people who are diagnosed. If you've been diagnosed with primary hypothyroidism, then chances are you have an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And the challenge is many people don't even realize that in all likelihood their primary hypothyroidism is actually an autoimmune disease-based condition. So what happens is as your immune system attacks and damages your own thyroid, it decreases your ability to produce adequate amounts of T4 and T3. So regardless of conversion issues elsewhere, then you're going to start to basically notice some of the thyroid symptoms. So those thyroid symptoms are going to be cold feet and hands, tired and sluggish, increased weight gain even with a low-calorie diet, and the list goes on and on. It could be thinning hair, hormonal shifts, you name it. There's so many things that are a consequence of thyroid metabolism in terms of the symptom-based issues with regards to the body. So there's at least two types of people that can fall under the thyroid metabolic disorder category. The first are those who have never been diagnosed, and the others are those who have been diagnosed. So if you've been diagnosed as having hypothyroidism, then you know that your thyroid's producing inadequate amounts of T4 and T3. So all of a sudden they'll typically give you hormone replacement therapy. That's going to be one of many different choices. There's bioidentical, there's synthetic, there's T4, there's T3. Regardless, they give you some hormone replacement therapy to help support your thyroid issues. But many people continue to express thyroid symptoms despite the fact that they're being appropriately medicated. And again, that's because some of those other steps have not been addressed. So in our program, built into the program is basically a support system to help the many different aspects and steps within the thyroid metabolic chain of events. And by doing that, we can help people to express tremendous potential, not just in how they feel, but also in basically how they function. So as a consequence of bringing what we're going to call the supporting cast members of thyroid metabolism back into a better state of balance, we can help people to express potential that they have not expressed in a very long time. So if you're interested in learning more about how our program can maybe help you to address some of your underlying issues and concerns, then we invite you to come in for a consultation where we can share some additional thoughts. In the meantime, we wish you every blessing for health and happiness.